All right, AJ, I know I asked you like in a screaming clubhouse on Monday night, but can you just explain how rewarding this postseason berth has been for you versus previous Padre teams?
Yeah, I mean it's always good to get to October. So I think from that standpoint, it's always a great feeling. And again, I think our ability to do it. Now you talk about 4 times in 6 years, just a lot of pride. For the organization, I think it speaks to like the organizational strength, scouting, player development, big league team, and obviously our players. Again, you want to be a spot where consistently you're amongst the best organizations in the game, and that starts with playing in October, and we've been able to do that here so far over the last 5 or 6 years.
How big a deal is that for you? I mean, 4 times in 6 seasons, the first time in franchise history. I know when you made all these moves, when you signed Manny Machado, when you got your extension, you talked about the expectation of creating the expectation of postseason every single year, not just once in a while.
Yeah, I think that's, again, like you set out with Coles as a group, and I think from day one here we've talked about playing on the big stage, and that's not like hey, every 3 or 4 years if we can just get into a wild card series and you get bounced in 3 games. That's big stage is the World Series. To do that, got to give yourself a lot of chances and a lot of spots in the dance in terms of like giving yourself an ability to go play, and get to a World Series. So again, it's hard to do. It's hard for organizations to do it. There's a lot of great teams, great organizations throughout the game, but us to be able to do that and also win playoff series. I think we've won 4 playoff series here this decade, and advanced each time. I think that's huge. So I think it's how we measure ourselves in terms of getting to October and then winning in October. And to be in that position again this year is pretty special.
You're aggressive at every single trade deadline, but especially this one. When you think of all the trades, and you've had bigger splashes before, getting Juan Soto, a pretty decent name, Josh Hader, those things, but do you think this is the best deadline that you have pulled off to date?
Yeah, I mean, I know, like, in terms of what we needed this year, we had a team that we felt good about, but we felt had some real holes, and that we were just going to need some, we knew that we needed multiple bats, and, if we could, we'd like to address behind the plate, and then, some type of impact arm. So I'm being glad to see really the way that the guys have embraced the new players, the way they fit in here, because you can't really predict that. I think you can predict a little bit how it's going to fit on the field, but the way we've seen it off the field, the way they've matched, like the chemistry, and I think that part's been good to see. Every year is a little bit different. I mean, I think, we look up last year, we were able, and again, like the area was the bullpen, that we had blown some games in the first half of the 24 season, and getting Jason Adam and, Brian Hoeing and Tanner Scott last year were big for the team, and I think it helped us. It helped us get to October and helped us win a playoff series. I think this year, same thing. We got to the deadline. I think our group did a great job. And I think it helped us get to this point. Now hopefully it's going to help us win some series.
You have quite a few guys in this team. Significant players are going to be free agents come this offseason. How much of your aggression was about making sure that you won now with this group? With Manny Machado, over 30, Darvish maybe towards the latter side of his career. How much was taking advantage of the talent you do have and the guys who are expected to walk after the season?
Yeah, I think we're always cognizant of, again, we talked about it in 20 when we made a lot of trades at the deadline. It doesn't mean that, year after year, we expect to be good every single year. So, and, 6 years later, we're back in a postseason situation. So, all the moves we make and the moves we made this year at the deadline, Mason Miller is going to be with us for, 4 or 5 playoff races. Same thing with Freddie Fermin. Ramon Laureano has a chance to be here next year as well. It's like the rental player situation's got to be the right deal, right player, et cetera. But we're adding to a core group of guys that we feel like are going to be good and good for a while. So I don't think you ever want to get into a spot where, hey, this is it's a 1-year situation. We have to win this year. I think we look at it as, we expect to win and we expect to have a team and, that can go deep into October. And when you have a team that can win a World Series, we take that serious. I think it's a little bit easy at times to look and say, hey, we want to keep this window open till 2030. I think we've demonstrated that we have the ability to do both. We have the ability to be aggressive at the deadline and still look up 5 or 6 years later and year in, year out have a team that we feel like can win a World Series.
How often do you second guess yourself on these trades? Like, it's easy to go ahead and look at, when James Wood when he came in with the Nationals, see the damage he did, but how often do you maybe not what if? Do you do that often or not really?
All the time.
Really?
I think. I constantly. We constantly as a group and myself personally constantly look back and what were you thinking here? What were you thinking there? Good deal, bad deal. I think the one thing that you can get into baseball at times, like good or bad, is like the immediate payback or the immediate feedback. sometimes it takes some time for it to play out. So whether or not you move a guy and his first outing somewhere else is great, and then a couple weeks later, they're not as good, or it just takes time to kind of see what the end result is. But I think from our standpoint, the biggest thing we've been as a group is, we're willing to trade some players that we know are going to stay in the big leagues and be good big league players for a while. But if it gets us what we need both now and the future, we're open to doing that. And I think that sometimes when you sit back and look at the totality of everything, and year out we have a good team, I think that kind of adds to the evaluation piece. But I think it's healthy. It's healthy for anybody, and I think it's a big part of us is looking back and be like, all right, what did we miss? What was right with our process? What was wrong with our process? What was right with our decision making? And hopefully get better each year.
You and Peter used to talk a lot of ball, and you would run all these different trades by him, different scenarios. How different was it this last season with John Seidler in charge? What's that conversation like? What's the dynamic like? What's the relationship like when you do want to go ahead and make a deal?
Yeah, I mean, I think like we've had all different setups here in terms of the time that I've been here as the general manager. But I think the biggest thing that we try to do as a group, and I try to do, is just be very thorough and really cover every possibility. And then it's healthy to have honest conversation, with ownership. And this year is no different in terms of with John sitting down and presenting, hey, here's the positives, here's the negatives, here's kind of where it sets us up for this year. Here's some of the alternatives. Here's if we don't make this deal or that deal. So I think John really enjoyed that process. I know he was, he enjoyed coming into the room, and I know Peter would always talk about it. And same thing with Ron Fowler. They would always talk about, you guys need to see the room, enjoy it. It's a good process. So that's always fun to hear people that aren't a part of it on a day-to-day basis come in and enjoy the back and forth. And I think Ron would talk to a lot. Some of the people have no business, being in, from a commonality standpoint, being in that spot, other than the fact that they're all trying to win games for the Padres and, speak their piece and say what needs to be done for us to win a World Series. So I think from that standpoint this year, I know John really enjoyed it and being a part of it. And I enjoyed, again, the feedback back and forth, because there's things that I may not be thinking about or the group may not be thinking about. It always helps to get different perspectives.
Also, Ron had no problem going on the radio and criticizing a player that who was struggling or a move that he didn't like. So just a little bit different. What's your relationship like, though, with John? And I know, of course, what you had with Peter was very, very special and irreplaceable. And that's, I don't expect that again with John. But what is your relationship like with John?
Yeah, I think, again, John's very respectful of our baseball team and our organization. I think he allows myself and Eric to do our jobs, and hopefully we've demonstrated we can do them at a fairly decent level and good clip for the city of San Diego and for the fans. So I think he's seen the track record. John's, he's a baseball fan. He comes to all the games. He's, you don't have to sometimes, you explain a little bit in terms of, what it means big picture wise. He has a pretty good feel for the big picture side of things, and the Padres specifically. He's watched a lot of Padre games over the years. So, again, last year with Eric Katsenda, this year with John, I think the thing that's been consistent in terms of the different setups that I've had is you have people that want to win and they love the game of baseball, and I think from my standpoint, I think they feel that our group's very thorough and there's a lot of trust there, and I think we've earned that trust.
I know you want to win every single year. That's always going to be your expectation. But how much pressure did you feel coming into the season that you needed to win the season?
I mean, every year, every year we feel a sense of responsibility, and you want to go, put a good product on the field and a team that can do something special. So, I don't think anything's really ever changed from 2015 and some of the rebuilding teams. You come in and, every year is super important and crucial to do what you set out to do as a baseball operations group and team. So, again, I think we've looked at it, every year as feeling like, look, we want to do everything we can to get our team better and put our organization in a better spot. I think from this year's standpoint, you always, at least I know personally from my standpoint, I always feel like a big sense of responsibility to the city of San Diego, the fan base, to do everything we can to help, to help put us in that spot. And it's fun. It's fun to win, So I think from that coming into this year, I don't think it was really any different, but that's because our bar is always at a pretty high level with our baseball group.
Padres are about to send I think they've already set a new attendance record for this season, and you already mentioned, back-to-back trips to the postseason. By the way, congratulations! You finally broke the odd number curse 4 times in 6 seasons, and a lot of that success is about what the players that you brought in. You have 1 year, I think 1 year left on your deal, right, with the Padres on your contract?
I think focusing right now on on the Brewers today and getting ready for the playoffs next year. So honestly, I'm probably guilty of not really knowing that all the time. So.
Okay, I looked it up before this interview. You have 1 year left on your deal. I'm not sure how unusual it is for a GM and also a manager to go into a lame duck season. Have you had any talks with this ownership group about your extension, about your situation?
Yeah, to me again, it's not anything that, from my standpoint, it's the focus is all on the field, the team, the playoffs. It's a super important time, and again, like I think we're really dialed into whoever we're going to play here next week, doing everything we can to to be ready from an advanced scouting standpoint, information standpoint for our player and team. And I love San Diego. I love this organization. It's been my life here, obviously now for more than a decade. Living here in San Diego, what we built as a group and organization. Eric, myself, the Seiler family. So again, I think there'll be a time and a place for that, but right now it's all about on the field and trying to do everything we can to go win a World Series.
When you make all these moves, though, is it with the expectation that you're going to be here for the foreseeable future with this organization?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think anybody that's sitting there and trying to look at, what it means from, anything other than trying to make the best decisions possible for San Diego and for the organization, and that's both short and long term. And we tried to do that, every year, and there's been some years we've been aggressive trying to add players at the deadline or in the off season. There's been other years where we've kind of let it come to us. I think that really is more determined on the market and what goes on there. But it's always with the idea that this is about doing something for the long term and doing something that's sustainable. And Don Welke'd always say you need people with ability and then you need stability, and I think we've seen that here in San Diego. We have a baseball operations group that's been together for a long time. Some people in their roles, P.T. Young, Josh Stein, Logan White, David Post, I can go on and on and on, that have been, they're a part of San Diego, and they understand what the fans feel and believe. They understand our organization in and out. That's a huge part of it. And, I think we just focus on doing a good job, and, we do that. I think good things are going to happen here down the road.
What's your expectation of, or your understanding of what payroll might look like for next season? I mean, you have quite a few guys that could be free agents. Michael will be free agents. Michael King, Dylan Cease, Luis Arraez, Robert Suarez. Have you had any talks with any of those guys about possible extensions or their agents yet?
Yeah, I think in terms of payroll and what it looks like, it's always you get to the end of the year, we have a good process in terms of sitting down with ownership, myself, Eric Grubner. And I think, again, sit down and we'll be open-minded. There's been years we've added to the payroll. There's been years we've stayed consistent. It's always with the idea that, it's about putting us in a position to win a championship. And I don't think I think we've demonstrated over the time. We've had teams, and starting back in 2020 that, had different payroll numbers. Then we really jumped the payroll up and added a lot of talent and guys at a higher price point. And then the last few years, we've done it at a different level. So in terms of winning championships, I think, it doesn't come down to it has to be at this level or this dollar point. We're not an organization that does that. I think we sit back, we see what's on the market, we see what we have in our system and what's on our current team, then hopefully make good decisions. That'll be the same process this offseason when we get to the end of the year, hopefully in a long time, and we don't have to think about it here, shortly or quickly. I think we'll have good conversations about what it's going to take, and we've always had an ownership group that's understands it. It's all about winning championships and what we're going to need to do that. Yeah, a couple minutes.
I'll be quick. Hi, Ruben. Okay, there's.
Tell Marty last one.
I can't.
We gotta talk about some postseason.
Okay, I'll be quick. There are two players that will probably cause more conversation than anybody else. One of them is Luis Campusano. We'll get that later on. The other is Fernando Tatis. How do you judge the sort of season that he has had?
I think with Tati, one of the interesting parts is and he's talked about it is. It's really the one part that's new for Fernando, and Fernando's super impactful. Yeah. He can dominate the game any way possible. A true five-tool player. But one thing Fernando hasn't really done is gone kind of wire to wire. I think really dating back to, and some of it's not because of him. It's because he was dealing with COVID or a lockout situation. Obviously the injuries and the suspension, but for Fernando to go through and play 162. It's been a little different version of Fernando this year in terms of getting on base, grinding at bats. I know, but he's still, to me, when we look at it, he's one of the most impactful players in the game. he can, you go into last year's playoff series against the Braves and the Dodgers, and arguably the best player on the field, and a guy that can, impact your both ways, offense, defense, and on the bases. So, he continues to mature and grow, like overall in terms of how he sees the game, how he impacts the game. But Fernando's one of the best players in the game, and huge piece of what we're doing as an organization. And I think for him to kind of get out there and play, full 162 this year, that's something a little different for him, and we'll be better for it, and he'll be better for it.
I think highs in games played, stolen bases, runs, and walks, but it's also the lowest slug of his career. And he went through an incredible, like a 3-month stretch with not much power. I think, 2 home runs in June and July, and then only 1 in August. I mean, what's the best version of Fernando? Do you think that he is as impactful as he's been for the Padres? Do you expect more from a player who's so gifted?
I mean, I think Fernando, I think the biggest thing is he has the ability to do a lot of everything. So, I don't think there's any ceiling you put on Fernando Tatis. I think, when you look at me, you talk about platinum glove winner, or, a guy that could win a home run title, a guy that could, steal 40 bases, go 50-50. I think all of that is on the table. So I don't think it's a negative thing to have high expectations for any player. And for Fernando, I think it's just because he's got so much ability and he's got a lot of great baseball instincts. So I don't think we ever put a ceiling on that. I think every year is a little bit different. But for him, I think the conversation is always about what's the most you can do.
Okay, you got to go. You have to talk. You're pitching with Ruben Niebla, but one more question. There was an NFL insider who said that if the Padres go to the World Series, does he get to sit in the box with you? Do you want to go ahead and answer that question?
I think we're in the World Series. A lot of people at that point, I'm open to anybody sitting in the box. So, I think if we go play in October. Yeah, a lot of things will be on the table, so we'll be open to that for sure.
Are you ready for the Jackson Dart era?
I think I've watched every week for about the last 10 years. Yeah, excited to see a good young quarterback come in and hopefully help the Giants out for sure.